Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today I want to do an analysis on whether or not Hodinkee's reviews of watches avoid negativity. And the way I've decided to examine this is I've focused on their hands-on section of their website. That's the section that's described as longer form reviews for watches that they've actually spent time with. So I thought it was the most reasonable place to look for you to have positives and negatives. And I decided to examine the April 2022 period, since that's a fully complete month and it's relatively recent to the time of this video's recording. And that examination thus includes 26 watch reviews. Now, in terms of my assessments for negativity, I am deliberately avoiding instances of personal use. So, for example, if a reviewer says, I wouldn't wear this watch myself, I don't construe that as a negative. Likewise, if they say the watch is too small or too large for me, I don't construe that as a negative. Obviously, there's a certain functional limits that everyone's going to have. What I'm looking for is for them to actually say something like, the watch is too big, like it's too big for everyone. Or having a critique about the movement or the price or the bracelet or things of that nature where they're being pretty clear. And one of the things I'm watching for when I read through all of these reviews is whether they do a hedge. So, and I don't count hedges, but I'll highlight them. So a hedge would be something along the lines of saying, I didn't think this would be a very legible dial, but, or I'm sure that most people were very concerned about the thickness of this watch. However, so those sort of things disqualify, in my view, the negative. You presented like you were going to cover a negative, and then you're telling everyone it's not actually a negative. So don't worry, I'm not going to read all these aloud. These are very long. At least most of these reviews were very, very long, and I have read through all of them. So we will go chronologically. I'll talk about every single review very briefly, and I'll point out any potential negatives that I identified and which ones I actually considered to be negative. So let's start with the first review, and that is from April 1st, 2022. And the title is the third time the charm for the A. Langenzone's Odysseus. Now, there were several elements of the review that stood out to me. So one of them was, the first thing as a potential negative that came to light was talking about the color. And the author had mentioned that they thought the color seemed a bit safe or even intentionally inoffensive. And I initially thought that might be possible to construe as a negative. However, I ruled this one out because the start of the sentence did denote while the color is nice. So saying that, I think, kind of disqualified the rest of the sentence. And so far, that one, no negatives in my view. Second section of the article that caught my eye was where the reviewer said, quite honestly, I've always found it disappointing that the combination of the integrated bracelet with a full oscillating weight makes it much more difficult to enjoy a comprehensive view of the movement. I actually consider this a true negative. There's nothing that sort of disqualified it. We might find it maybe somewhat of a silly negative because it is subjective, but most of these things ultimately will be. At least in this instance, though, the reviewer has clearly specified that they think that this format with the integrated bracelet is inferior. They did later on in that paragraph note that they didn't see an easy solution for the complaint, but I didn't view that as a hedge, so I actually count this article as having a negative statement. Now, there was one more part of the article that caught my eye that I'll go ahead and note, even though we're already tagging this as having a negative opinion in the review. And we're doing it by review, not by number of negatives total. So here, what happened is the reviewer was writing about the discrepancy in the price of this watch, given that it's titanium. He was comparing back to the old original stainless steel Odysseus. So originally, I was also going to think, okay, here's another negative to flag. However, I ruled it out because of the final maybe not is a total hedge on being unwilling to commit to, as a reviewer, saying, yes, this watch is overpriced. So, but anyway, this review did have a clear negative in my view, so I counted it on my list. So let's go to the second review chronologically. And this is also from April 1st, 2022. And this article is, the Vacheron Constantin 222 is the greatest thing since sliced bread, which isn't all that great, but you get the idea. So here, there was one item that caught my eye in the article, and the author, the reviewer, noted, as much as I love the 1120 and wish in the abstract Vacheron had used it in this first reissue of the 222, in practice, it pains me to admit this so much, I'm having a hard time typing it. But once I had the new 222 on, I didn't notice the omission at all. This is regarding the movement and the decision not to use the original 222's movement. So I think in this instance, very clear, there was a statement and then there was a hedge to the statement. Clearly admitted as a, yes, this was going to be a negative, but it is not a negative. And thus, there is no negative. That is the only real language in this article that I thought might have been construed as negative. The rest is neutral or positive. So I do not count this review as having any negativity in it. Let's move to the third one. This is from April 2nd, 2022, and this review is titled Southpaw Rolex, the left-handed GMT gets it right. And as that might suggest, I didn't see any negativity in the article. I saw one that I thought might have been a negative point. It was where the reviewer said, I can also share I tried using my left hand to cycle through the time zones off the wrist, and that did feel strange. But he ended the paragraph by saying, you simply get used to it. So again, that's an example in my view of, oh, this could be seen as a negative, but in reality, it's on you. You just have to adapt to it. So no negative article. Was only neutral and positive. So let's jump to the fourth review. This is also from April 2nd, 2022, and this is Exploring Familiarity and Functionality with the Black Bay Pro. And there was one part that I initially tagged as possibly being negative, and it's not very surprising either because the biggest discussion I ever saw online about the Tudor Black Bay Pro is just how thick it is. So there is a paragraph where the reviewer notes that the Black Bay Pro does not share the 58's lovely proportions, largely due to the thicker case. Notes that it doesn't do anything to hide its height from your eyes, but then I disqualified this because he says, I didn't find it at all cumbersome on wrist. I figured it might feel a bit off balance or top heavy, but when worn, the proportions felt fine, and I don't think the thickness is in any way a deal breaker. So again, opens with potential negativity, totally cancels it all out with a hedge. So this article, this is the only one that I saw that might have been construed as negative per my definitions. So this article did not have any negativity in it. Article number 5 is a review from April 2nd again, and this is the new Cartier Santos Dumont that stole the show. I have no highlights from the article to specify because I found absolutely zero negativity, even potential negativity in the review. So let's jump to review number 6. This is from April 3rd, 2022, titled, I want the all-new FP Journe Vagabondage to lock me up and throw away the key. I did find one part that I initially thought could be negative. The reviewer noted, I want to touch on Journe's long-standing approach to distribution of the Vagabondage series. I feel a bit conflicted about it. But I end up canceling this one out as being negative. It was an interesting one, and I was torn on this. But the final 2 sentences are why I didn't. And the first is, shouldn't newer collectors have an opportunity to buy a Vagabondage? And then the second sentence is, or will this line always be dedicated to rewarding the horological establishment? So again, in my view, the reviewer here has and this, of course, I'm projecting, this is my speculation, but I think the reviewer has a clear opinion here. And I think that the way it's structured, my sense is the reviewer thinks that the way Journe is doing the Vagabondage is not fair. And that if you were to ask the reviewer, they would say they think newer collectors should have some capability about actually being able to buy a Vagabondage. But he hedged. He hedged in the language. I can't count it as a negative. And so I don't have any negatives from this article. So this is another article devoid of negativity. So let's jump to article number 7. This review is from April 4th. And its title is Grand Seiko Comes to Geneva with its most complicated mechanical watch ever. There was one section of the review that caught my eye initially. It was discussing that it's a skeleton watch. And so I thought, okay, I might actually have something to flag as a negative on the watch. But ultimately, I could not count it because the author noted the construction of the movement and essential parts of the interface more than make up for the lack of some finely textured dial or stark white enamel canvas. Had potential, couldn't follow through. There's a hedge. Ruling out that there was, in fact, any negativity whatsoever. And that was the only paragraph that caught my eye, so I'm tagging this article as not having any negatives. Let's jump to article number 8. This review is from April 6, 2022, and the title is, and apologies for my pronunciation on all of these, but The Breguet Marine Hora Mundi takes you from one time zone to another in the blink of an eye. I did not see any paragraphs in this whatsoever that I thought were negative, so nothing to see here. Let's move right along to article number 9. This review is from April 8th, 2022. The title is The HYT Supernova Blue Moon Runner and a Defense of the Hyperwatch. Again, I couldn't find any negative paragraphs whatsoever in this piece, so nothing to see as a negative, and we'll go ahead and we will move on. I feel like, incidentally, as we're going along here and getting further from Watches and Wonders, these start to feel like they're becoming more positive. Granted, so far, we've only tagged one as having a true negative that was not hedged on, but at this point, I'm not even identifying paragraphs that were catching my eye to be worth talking about. So let's go ahead and discuss the 10th review. This is from April 8th, and the title is Seeing Things Clearly with the Chanel 12 X-Ray Red Edition. And no, I don't have any negative paragraphs. The reviewer did have a section, I won't highlight it, because it was regarding the size of the watch versus their wrist size. And as I noted at the start, those sort of personal, like, would I wear it sort of things, I don't think are worth discussing in the context of negativity or positivity. I don't think anyone considers it a negative review when you say, this watch is too small for X size wrists and this watch is too big for Y size wrists. So let's go ahead and let's move to the 11th review. This is from April 9th, and it's titled The Tudor Black Bay GMT Root Beer Should Not Be Slept On. And here, there was a paragraph that caught my eye, and actually, reading the paragraph in full, I am going to tag this as an article, a review, that actually had a negative. And so we'll add a second one to our list, because the reviewer did note I'm not partial to the bracelet. Yes, subjective choice, but especially given the elaboration of the subjective choice, noting that this takes the concept a bit too far. Something about the sheer size of the non-tapering bracelet and the saturation of the gold center links draws attention away from the star of the show, the watch itself. So I feel the reviewer was being very clear, not just saying, yeah, I don't care for two-tone, but rather, no, this is too two-tone. There's too much two-tone. So yes, it was targeted at the bracelet, but the bracelet was a big option here. It's a part of the review, and we're really assessing the review. And so because of that, I think it should count, and so I'm counting it. So we have a second one here as of our 11th review. So what about review number 12? That one came out on April 11th, and this one is titled Rolex Won the Regatta with this year's set of Yachtmasters. I did not see any negative paragraphs in this article, so nothing to denote. So let's go ahead and let's move on to the 13th article. This review came out April 12th, and its title is The Chanel Boyfriend Red X-Ray Skeleton Red Edition and the Art of the Movement. Again, I couldn't find any negative portions, any paragraphs, any sentences that caught my eye. So let's go ahead and tag it as non-negative, and let's move on to the 14th review. This one came out April 12th. Its title is H. Mosier's Show-Stopping Cylindrical Tourbillon Has a Heartbeat You Won't Believe. Again, I just couldn't find anything that caught my eye as a negative in the review. So let's go ahead and let's move on. The 15th review came out April 14th. And that is Tag Heuer looks to the 1970s and nails it with the new orange diver. In the review, the reviewer actually gets to discussing the crystal and the use of a magnifier for the date window. And this one, I'm going to flag as a negative. And that's because the reviewer said, I'm sure naysayers will come for the magnified date window, and while I don't like how it looks, I can't complain about how it works. Now, the structure of that sentence is a hedge, but the reason I'm going to go ahead and count it is it's a false hedge. So the reviewer has said he can't complain about how it works. So all he's doing is saying, yes, the magnifier in fact magnifies. It's such a blatantly, it's like, well, you know, I don't really like how the crown feels against my wrist, but I can confirm it does indeed wind the watch. That's the sort of thing. He has clearly stated that he doesn't like how this Cyclops looks on this watch. He didn't say anything about maybe others would feel differently. Obviously, that would be true for anything subjective, but my point is, in the review, he clearly took a stance that this Cyclops does not look good. And so because of that, he's listed a negative about the watch, and so the review has a negative, and so I'm tagging the review as being containing of a negative. So we're up to 3 now, and as a reminder, this was the 15th review that we have looked at. All right, so let's move on to review number 16. This one came out April 18th. Its title is Old School Subtlety with the Omega CK859. I did not see any negative paragraphs, sentences, or statements in this review. So let's move on to the 17th review. This one came out April 19th. Its title is Japanese Microbrand Mirko Uses Color to Tell a Story. There was a section of the review I did flag where the reviewer was talking about the price, which is $1,746. but I had to rule it out. The sentence that caught my eye started promising. It said, "It may seem a bit dear for a Miyota-powered diver at first." And there's the hedge, at first. "But to my mind, there's a reasonable value proposition here." So, complete hedge. He ruled out the first part of the sentence, and so there's no negativity in this article that I could find. Let's move on to the 18th article. This review is from April 20th. Its title is "Zenith Embraces an Early Aughts Favorite in the New Chronomaster Open." There are a couple of sections of the review that caught my eye. The first one was talking about the use of having an open heart aesthetic. The sentence of interest started promising with, "I personally struggle a bit with the concept," but then it fully hedges. And the reviewer notes, "But I appreciate how Zenith has gone out of its way here to make the naturally asymmetrical dial layout a bit more aesthetically consistent than on previous generations." So again, when I read this, I get the impression the reviewer still doesn't actually like this, doesn't like this look, but didn't want to go to the full extent of saying that it's bad or that it's an ugly look or a wrong look. And again, all reviews are subjective, but that was the decision made here. So there was another part, however, of the review that also caught my eye, and that was regarding the constant seconds. Again, it was a hedge sentence though, so while it started promising, I had to rule it out. The reviewer said, "It's not the most legible constant seconds display out there, but I think that's forgivable given the amount of focus on the exposed escapement." So, okay, we know he doesn't like how illegible the constant seconds is, but he gave them a pass. So ultimately, this Zenith article, I couldn't flag any of it as negative. And we're going to move on to the 19th review of April. That came out April 21st. The title is "The New Black Dial Tank Louis Cartier Isn't a Must, but It's Still a Must." They're very clever with their titles over at Hodinkee. But no paragraphs caught my eye whatsoever regarding any negativity in the review, so there's nothing to see here beyond that really catchy title. Nothing negative. Let's move on to review number 20. This one came out April 25th, and I'm going to totally butcher this title, but the review is called "Zypec Splits the Difference with a New Antarctique Rattrapante Ice Blue." Again, very, very sorry for my inability to say words. But what I can say much more clearly is I did not see any negativity in this review, so I'm ruling it out from consideration. Let's go to the 21st review. This also came out April 25th. Its title, much more pronounceable, is "The New Rolex Day Date in Platinum is All About the Bezel." The review is also all about the positivity. I couldn't find anything negative in this review, and so let's go ahead and let's move on. The 22nd review of April came out on the 26th of April. Its title is "Parmigiane's New Tonda PF GMT Rattrapante is the Understatement of the Year." Again, I couldn't find any clauses in this review that came across as negative, so I didn't have anything to flag and show you, and I think we just have to go and move on. The 23rd review came out April 27th. It's titled "The Cartier Mas Mysteries is Close-Up Magic." Again, I just couldn't find anything negative that caught my eye in the review at all. So review number 24, it came out April 27th. Its title is "Beauvais Kicks Off Its Bicentennial with a New Easy-to-Adjust World Timer." Again, I'm sorry, I just can't find anything negative in the review. So going to the penultimate review of April, this is our 25th, and it came out on April 29th. Its title is "The Mysterious Vintage Doxa Army Resurfaces as a Modern Ceramic Watch." Again, couldn't find any negativity. And so looking at the final watch review, which was from April 29th, titled "F.P. Journe's Most Complicated Creation is an Easy-Wearing Tool Watch." And again, absolutely no negativity to be found. For those trying to keep score, and I'm sorry I couldn't make that more entertaining than I did, the total count out of 26 reviews is I found 3 that mentioned something that I felt clearly met the definition of being a negative aspect to the review. 3 out of 26 reviews, that's 11.5%. So on the question, do Hodinkee reviews avoid negatives? I think the answer is yes. Not universally, but a majority of them seem to very clearly be avoiding the use of negativity. Now, I am not ascribing reasons to that avoidance. It could be that all these watches are just all that great, and most of these watches are really expensive, and maybe that's why. It could be that they don't want to compromise their relationships with these manufacturers and they are deliberately avoiding negativity for those reasons. Or they know the people that work there. There are all sorts of things. There's all sorts of speculation. All I can say is, at least based off of the definitions that I used for my analysis, there's really clearly an attempt not to say negative things in these reviews. And these are in the hands-on section. They very clearly are labeled as reviews. So I find it a little bit surprising. Again, with what few reviews I've done, I have perhaps done the opposite in terms of going out of my way to specify negatives where I think there are, because I like to do a list of pros and cons. But that's clearly not the approach that Hodinkee takes. Anyway, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you think the way I went about the analysis was wrong? Do you think I should have done it a little bit differently in some other way? It took quite a while to read all of these, so I'm not volunteering to go back. But I'd be interested to know if maybe I should have thought about it a different way, or if you agree and think that I did a pretty reasonable approach to try and assess whether or not the reviews had negatives in them. But go ahead and comment below on anything you'd like to say. I'd enjoy reading it. And other than that, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. And otherwise, I'll talk to everybody on the next one. Take care.